It's Friday, July 29th.
Thank God.
It's my son Wyatt's birthday today. Happy birthday, kiddo.
Happy B-Day, Wyatt.
I heard him sitting with his cousin Bo, who's visiting from Vancouver, on the trampoline yesterday. And Bo says, your dad was talking about a lady who got stepped on by an elephant. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, that doesn't sound like the type of story that I would tell a 5-year-old. And then I hear Wyatt say yes. And then the elephant came to her funeral and tried to step on her again.
What?
And I went, where did you guys hear this? And Bo looked at me and says, we heard it on your podcast. And I went, oh boy, listeners of all ages.
Fake news.
A shout out to it actually is a true story. Remember we talked about that was a wild story we talked about. Anyway, very sad story, obviously, but wild nonetheless. Listeners of all ages, those of you catching us on YouTube, those of you that are on the highway right now for this August long weekend en route to your destination and on your dash, you have the Mixlr audio app streaming Real Talk. We salute you. The show feels a little bit, and you don't want to say this kind of a thing, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's Friday. It feels a little bit like this show is a road trip for us, and we've got everything all packed up. We've got the kids buckled in. We've got our snacks. We've got our waters. Our coffees are ready to go. And as we make our way out of the city, we're hearing a small rattle. We're hearing a small rattle in the vehicle, and we're trying to. This is a John
Forgot
Hicks.
to put air in the tires.
This is a John Hicks appreciation post. There's been some troubleshooting this morning, but nonetheless, here we are. Supriya Dwivedi is going to join us in just a sec.
We can't wait for the new studio. Let me tell you that.
I'm so proud of John of everything you do to keep this show coming at us every single day. How's your long? You were busting your butt this long weekend. You're going to be working. You're spinning tunes.
Yeah.
You're keeping people happy. You're going to be at a wedding. You got a bunch of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Millwood's Pool tonight, 7 to 9 at the Recreation Center there. Also going to be doing a wedding on Saturday, and then Sunday I'll be closing down K-Days with a couple of my friends.
Oh, wow.
DJ Quake and DJ CeeLo. We are the last act on the Spotlight stage from 7 until 10 o'clock, and then K-Days is over.
The final act of K-Days.
We're shutting
with
her down.
Johnny Infamous. That's great. Do you have a go-to song? What are you going to kick off the set with?
No.
What about the wedding? What do you kick off a wedding set with?
It depends.
Probably Cotton Eye Joe, hey? Yeah, okay, cool, great. Yeah, Cotton, there we go. All right, happy wedding. Congratulations to the bride and groom. It hadn't been Cotton Eye. Come on, everybody, get on in.
No.
Not so much. Okay. We're going to get to Supriya Dwivedi in just a second. Wanted to let you know, of course, how proud we are to partner with the sponsors that keep this thing going. Hey, John does the troubleshooting. The sponsors make sure the lights stay on. How about that? And that includes the team at Apex Automation. They're providing intuitive, fully autonomous solutions to industry. They work in, like, forestry, brewing, engineering, mining, you name it. Software controls. If your business could benefit by giving people back their time, you're going to want to get in touch with Apex Automation today. Proudly based out of Edmonton, they're working literally around the world, and that means they're always looking for skilled engineers as well. If you're looking for a work situation that allows you to achieve great things, enjoy flexible hours, and participate in professional development opportunities on the regular, you're going to want to check out apexautomation.ca. Our friends at Kubi Energy want to remind you that the federal government has introduced this $40,000 interest-free loan. Plus, there's a $5,000, what do you want to call it? It's not like a bursary. It's not like a gift, but you don't have to pay it back. What do they call that again? An incentive? 45,000 reasons to visit kubienergy.ca right now and get a free quote on what it might cost to put solar panels up on your roof. You're going to save money. It's more reliable now than ever before. Why not join the movement towards sustainable energy growth in Canada by visiting kubienergy.ca and asking them about the $40,000 interest-free loan. Supriya Dwivedi, our good friend, joins us every Friday morning. And Supriya, just because we brought you up on camera here, I thought it might be a good time to launch into our conversation, not just about the federal government and politics, but we're going to cover a bunch of ground today. Supriya, of course, I don't know what's going on right now, but Supriya Dwivedi is the co-host of Seriously with Supriya and Ryan, joining us live this morning from her home studio in Toronto. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, we're having a Friday that feels a bit like a Monday, but that's what just makes the fact that both of us are laughing about it means it's really no big deal. I got an email from a guy named Terry. I don't want to reveal too much about it because Terry's going to come on the show to talk about his new book in a few days. And he said, one of the things I love about Real Talk is how you guys don't let the screw-ups bug you at all. And I said, I think that's a compliment. I think it's a compliment. Regardless, it's been an exciting couple of weeks for you and me. Seriously, our new project out every single Wednesday, and it's been amazing to see the audience connect with that. We got a tweet yesterday that I loved, a guy that said, I love Real Talk. He says, I try to spend as much time as I can getting up to speed on the news of the day, but it's really difficult, he says, to stay on top of it all. That's why he loves Seriously. In less than a half hour every Wednesday, he can cut through the noise of the biggest stories making news across the country.
That's it. And that's what Seriously does, right? Is exactly that. You've got a fire hose of news coming at you every week. I mean, we joked at the beginning of this week's show that it used to be in the summer, there was a news slowdown, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And so that's what you and I do. Cut through the noise, get past the headlines, and give folks what they need to know.
Yeah,
no
kidding. No kidding. I should lead with small talk when we bring you in because a lot of people feel like they know you and then they want to know kind of what's making you tick. And then you guys have big, long weekend plans?
Yeah, I mean, not super big, just a lot of family stuff. Like we're not really going anywhere.
Yeah.
This time around, last weekend we were in the Finger Lakes region in New York. So that was sort of what we did instead of, making long weekend plans. But I actually just took my daughter yesterday, who's 3, to get vaccinated. And I know the last time you and I were sort of talking about this, and I don't know, I'm kind of relieved now that she's at least got 1 dose in her. She obviously doesn't have full protection yet. But it just seems like something that I've knocked off my to-do list that's sort of been looming at the back of my mind, since like March 2020.
What is she? Is she 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's 3. So yeah, because you and I talked in, I guess it was about a week ago approximately, on what uptake was going to be like for families with kids under 5. And it was forecasted that, a lot of public health experts in particular think that the number could be sub 40%, which surprises me a little bit. And I wonder if that has to do more with people's summer schedules, maybe their lack of availability, maybe they don't want to sit and stand in line at a health center. I don't know what it is. Maybe it improves once September looms, once they're getting set to go back to school.
Yeah, maybe it's probably a combination of a bunch of things, right? Like to your point, summer schedules do get in the way, of course. And if you're not faced with the prospect of your kid sitting in a classroom or in a daycare room or whatever, you may be a little bit more inclined to push it off. But I think also like the public health messaging on this has been somewhat abysmal, at least in Ontario anyway. So I would imagine that probably factors into it. But it was interesting in the parking lot yesterday of the clinic, the vaccine clinic, there was like an F Trudeau bumper sticker on one of the cars. And I like tensed up right away because I assumed, there was going to be like a protester somewhere as I got closer to the door, but, nowhere to be seen. Everything was fine, but it just goes to show the times that we're in that even, a bumper sticker on a car can kind of like,
I've felt the same way about the Canadian flag for the last year. So I find, like really, and there was a period of time where the Freedom Convoy was happening and the Olympic Games were happening concurrently. And I remember just observing that when you saw someone flying a Canadian flag from their car, you didn't know if they were cheering the country on or like wanting to basically blow up the federal government, literally or otherwise, and it was tough to know. And it's just been kind of mixed feelings about all of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually didn't really factor in the flag stuff, but that makes sense. I would imagine, though, it's probably the sentiment of wanting to blow up the federal government, figuratively or literally, might be a little bit more prevalent in your neck of the woods, maybe, than in mine.
Yeah, I've got a lot of people from our home province in Alberta talking about the fact that it seems like, anecdotally, or maybe actually, and I'll be honest, I don't have like statistics in front of me. I don't have the spreadsheets in front of me, but Alberta seems to be lagging in that vaccine availability for kids under 5. And I know that there's a lot of parents that are kind of wondering what gives with that, right? There's certain things that may fall in the lap of the federal government. There's other things that are provincial health matters. And this is one of those as well, where it would appear that Canadians in some provinces and territories have earlier access or maybe timely access to the vaccines for kids under 5 that others don't have. So this is a story that we're going to keep an eye on as well. Pretty interesting. We have Tasha Kheiriddin coming on the show after you. She's going to be joining Azim Jiwani and Rick Peterson. We're talking about the center ice conservative movement. I don't know if you've read much up on this, Supriya, or if you're familiar.
Yeah, I read
with it.
Tasha's book, actually. Big fan of Tasha. Her and I used to work together. She's from Montreal originally, so her and I go ways back. And she's great, sane voice. Her book is very good, even if you don't necessarily agree with a whole chunk of it. I would suggest going out and reading it if you are a fan of Canadian politics.
Yeah,
generally.
her book, The Right Path, How Conservatives Can Unite, Inspire, and Take Canada Forward. I'm pretty sure she was a colleague of ours, technically, or at Chorus Radio for a while. I mean, she does a ton, right? National political commentator, and she's co-president of the Charest campaign, isn't she still?
Yeah. She does it all.
Yeah, I mean, like, so she's got her hands in a lot of projects right now, and sort of the idea, the question they're asking, I guess, is who speaks for the middle? When they talk about the sort of fringe elements of the discussion of federal politics, you take a look at the folks on the far right and what they're demanding, and I think that you would say the Freedom Convoy could be kind of the personification or maybe the face of that. And then you look at the folks on the far left and what they're arguing for and what they'd like to see in politics, and it seems like there's these two factions just warring, and the majority of Canadians, at least the premise of this thought, is that the majority of Canadians fall somewhere in the middle and just aren't being represented politically. I'm expecting a good conversation in 20 minutes from now.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to get ahead of, because I know you are going to have this conversation, but I mean, I'd be very curious to know from their perspective, whom in the far left is being repped at the federal level and being normalized and being welcomed with open arms from progressive or left-leaning parties, because I don't disagree that there are obviously fringe elements to the progressive movement that, say things that are politically unfeasible or untenable or that people just don't necessarily have an appetite for. But I don't know if they're necessarily listened to and given a platform and a voice in the same way that the Freedom Convoy people are, or other people like the anti-vaxxer people are within the elements of the Conservative Party. So it's a little bit of an incongruency there, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair question. You kind of get the sense that the next federal election will be, I guess, one of two things, and I'm totally. This is actually what I'm about to say is insulting the intelligence of everybody, but it's never stopped.
It's good that you said that ahead of time.
You always want to get ahead of it, and when someone says that insult, you say, "Yeah, like I prefaced it. What do you want me to do?" But it's basically going to be either an assessment of the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's, not just his previous term, but his tenure as PM, and you wonder whether or not there is an expiry date, regardless of what someone's political legacy looks like. So, whether it's Trudeau or somebody else leading the Liberals in, that'll be the case. People will assess how that government performed, whether or not they perceive the government to be tired. Is it still motivated and capable? And then you'll take a look at the results of the Conservative leadership race, which will probably be Pierre Poilievre. Although, as my brother said yesterday, we're sitting around, he's visiting from Vancouver. We went to Henry Wisewood High School in Calgary. He doesn't follow politics a ton. He follows just enough to know what he needs to know. But he says, this Pierre guy, and I go, Poilievre. He goes, yeah, Pierre. He goes, it's strange. He goes, we went to high school together, right? I go, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, he was Jeff Poilievre back then. I go, huh, Jeff Poilievre. But he was the class historian for the Henry Wisewood class of 1997, which I thought was kind of funny, but I'll get back to it. So it'll be Jeff Poilievre leading the Conservatives most likely into this next election. It'll be people that either choose him or actively vote against him. And I think if he's perceived to be potentially the next Prime Minister of Canada, people that don't want to see that happen will then decide where they allocate their vote. And it's not necessarily going to be a vote for the Liberals or a vote for the NDP as opposed to a vote against that Conservative, the New Look party.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. The one caveat or qualifier I'd put there is that I think there are a bunch of people right now that are saying that they couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Conservative party that is led by Pierre. And I have a sneaking suspicion that a whole lot of those folks that are making that argument currently will somehow get amnesia once the election rolls around and end up coming into the Conservative fold one way or another, because partisanship is a heck of a thing, man. And I think that will ultimately end up prevailing, particularly if you've been, somewhat dissatisfied with the last few years, 7 years now, I think, of Liberal government, maybe inching up towards 10 by the time an election rolls around. So yeah, I mean, a lot can happen, but I just think that people tend to overstate their unwillingness to vote for a party simply because they don't like the leader.
Yeah. See an interesting campaign ad from the Jean Charest camp. People can check it out by way of his Twitter, essentially calling out Pierre for not participating in the debates. And it's a pretty good ad, actually. The question is it enough? Is the social media reach of it adequate? And will it make enough of a dent in Pierre's momentum? What do you think?
No, no, and no. Really quickly. I don't know. Like, it seems like a little bit too late. It is a good video that the Charest camp did put out. It's kind of funny and cheeky, and points at the fact that Pierre puts out these like one unidirectional videos, but isn't so into debate or anything where his views are going to be challenged. But I mean, he's already leading, right, by or at least we think. It's hard to tell in these circumstances, but all of the good money is on the fact that he is leading by quite a wide margin. He had former Prime Minister Stephen Harper come out and endorse him just this past week, so he's got a lot going for him. And I think if you're in the Pierre camp, you kind of look at the Jean Charest ad and you think it might be cute, but I don't think it's going to make you change your strategy, particularly when now all the camps, what they should be doing is ensuring that the folks that they signed up are actually going to end up voting for them, like for their leader and for their candidate. So I think they're just going to eat the cost because it's like a $50,000 fine or something. The other interesting aspect of this is, Leslyn Lewis has also said that and confirmed that she's not going to participate in the debate. So as of right now, I mean, you've only got Scott Aitchison, Jean Charest, and Roman Baber who are going to go head to head on August 3rd. So I'm curious as to what the dynamic would be. And I'm curious as to, how many people really tune in, because if you don't have, arguably the leader there, as well as, Leslyn Lewis, who, irrespective of whether or not you agree with her, she's certainly has a lot of conviction in her views, and she does represent a good chunk of the base of the party.
If you're advising Aitchison and Baber and to a certain degree Lewis, what's your advice at this point? I mean, Roman had a very interesting video that came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, where he was basically saying, if you like me, then put me as 1, don't put me as 2, because it is a ranked ballot, right? And so he was basically saying, like, don't give in to the fact that you're considering who may win overall. And he explained the process quite well in terms of how the candidate with the least amount of votes ends up dropping off if they don't, garner past a certain threshold. And I thought it was a very direct and good, sensible appeal to folks who may be considering how they should be ranking the prospective leaders. And I think that's interesting. And Aitchison, God love him, but I'd be very curious to know where his headspace is at right now. I mean, he's obviously very principled, conservative, one of the only, I think the only candidate that's come out in this race to take on, supply management in this country, which is risky business.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's interesting. And Charest, I don't know what he's thinking, man. He's probably just hoping that the folks who Pierre signed up, a good chunk of them don't actually end up materializing into mailing of their ballots.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting to see I don't know if you paid much attention to it, but the first debate in the beautiful city of Medicine Hat, Alberta. They played host to the first United Conservative Party leadership debate earlier this week, and there were some good insights. And I think some of the commentators, especially that kept an eye on it, were suggesting that, Danielle Smith may be the front runner here. Although a stick tap as well to Corey Hogan of The Strategist. I saw him yesterday put this out. He says, do we know if Danielle Smith is actually the front runner? Right? He basically says her campaign's making a lot of noise. He says, but we haven't seen access really to fundraising, except for the people met their payments. There's the deadline. They had to make the payments. So we know about that. He says, we don't know about memberships sold. He says, maybe it's just the fact that the other candidates are treating her like the front runner. And I thought that's a really interesting
half of it,
observation. Of course, it's more than half of it. That's almost all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. But that is a good point, because we don't have real independent polling to this effect, do we?
No. There were some polls that came out, and I think that they got buried I believe it was, I shouldn't do this stuff off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it was a Leger poll. I saw that it had Danielle Smith at 22% of stated support among those that were polled. It had Brian Jean like 2 percentage points behind at 20, and then the third, I think it was at 16 or 18%, was Travis Taves, formerly the finance minister. Kind of the more like you might perceive as like the steady candidate. Like his messaging was pretty on brand. He's got like the military style brush cut. He's got the pressed jeans. They showed the drone footage of his ranch. It's all perfectly mowed. Like Travis Taves is the guy that's like, if you put me in charge of the ranch, everything will function how it should. He's like, we released a balanced budget. There's no need to blow it all up. That's kind of his campaign. So you had those three candidates like within the same ballpark-ish. I thought the most interesting part of it, I thought that some of the other candidates, in particular Rebecca Schultz, maybe Leela here might pull a little bit more strongly, but to see Brian Jean and Danielle Smith running essentially neck to neck. But then, Supriya, here's the kicker. It was just a couple of days or maybe even 24 hours after those polling results came out that Danielle did her interview with the naturopath and started talking about preventing within your control to influence or impact the first 3 stages of cancer. And then people flip their lids for obvious reasons, and then that polling almost was, how that goes. That stuff evaporates into the ether.
They did, but I think it was Jason Markusoff, now over at the CBC, who pointed out that didn't she get another, or at least 2 other, again, I shouldn't be doing this off the top of my head, I'm going by memory, but more caucus support from the UCP.
Maybe. I bet Taves is running away with the caucus support, though.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got more caucus support than anybody else, I think, combined. And if one of the camps wants to prove me wrong on that, they can hit me up on Twitter. But that's the impression that I have. So anyway, interesting stuff to see. But the point that I wanted to make was that even through that debate, it's quite clear, at least to me, and I don't think I was the only one that noticed, that a lot of these candidates may know that they're not going to run away as the number one. They're not going to be that one that gets like, but if you can be like Baber's saying here, and I'm not suggesting that he's going to, I don't think Roman Baber will finish second or win the leadership, but that's fine. I don't have an axe to grind with him per se. You want to be number 2 or number 3 on everybody's lists. If you're the second choice on everybody's list, you're going to win the thing, no problem. That's how the rank ballot works.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do the math in my head right now. Yeah, I guess. Unless, like, there's enough people putting Pierre number 1 that actually puts him off the top on first ballot.
Yeah, no, I meant to, I'm muddying the waters by talking UCP and CPC at the same time, but we'll see how that all plays out. Let me ask you this before we run out of time. I know your Friday mornings are busy, and we sure appreciate Supriya Dwivedi joining us every Friday morning in this time slot. The Star reporting Elizabeth May. You knew we were going to talk about this. Set to, and I'm not laughing at this. Elizabeth May set to join the Green Party leadership races. She stepped down in 2019, but remains one of the party's 2 members in the House of Commons. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's just like, is it a comeback if she never really went away? Insert a joke about the Greens recycling here. You know what I mean? Where's Lisa Raitt when you need her to pull her off the stage? Like, the jokes kind of write themselves in terms of this. Lisa Raitt joke is in reference to the, I think it was like 2015, the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner where
everybody knows.
Yeah. Okay. Just in case.
Everybody remembers.
Forgot. Yeah. But look, I think what this really shows is the fact that the game was stacked against Annamie Paul from the jump, right? And all of the allegations and the rumors and whispers that her camp was kind of being demolished from inside, like the calls are coming from inside the house, right? Like that was all true. And the level of disrespect that was shown to Annamie by, the executive of the Green Party, I think it was unprecedented, like muting her mic during a conference call, like all of the leaks that they sort of let out. And just the racism and anti-Semitism that she, experienced throughout that entire ordeal was just such a bad mark on Canadian politics. And it's unfortunate that Elizabeth May, I think, is, set to re-enter the leadership race, because you can't have a party that is so centric on just one person. And the Green movement in this country should be a broad-based coalition of folks that care about the environment and that want to put, green policies to the forefront of the agenda. And unfortunately, what we're left with instead is a personality cult revolving around one person who doesn't seem to understand when it's time to just let go. And she said, in that 2019 was going to be her last election as leader. And I think she said something along the lines of that she had promised her daughter that she wasn't going to, do this again as leader. And I'm very curious to know how she broached that subject with her daughter this time around, or if she did. And, it's also worth noting that the Star is reporting that it won't just be Liz May running as leader. It's going to be like this co-leader type situation, which I know isn't super common, like in federal politics, but at least in Quebec, in like Quebec Solidaire has that sort of model, and they've, have been doing that for some time. But it's like, take a cue, man. Like, it's time to go. Like, this
Jonathan Pedneau fella.
Yeah.
I don't know much about him. A former human.
I mean, neither do I.
I'm
yeah.
referencing Star's reporting here. A former human rights worker who says also intends to run for leader, so that she's going to pitch herself as a co-leader. Which is interesting.
Like, are you co-leader if like nobody knows who the other guy is and everybody knows who you are, and the party is like essentially your party that is in your mold? Are you really co-leader? Like, what is that Jonathan guy going to be able to do if this is Liz May's party?
Yeah, it just kind of
it's just like
just kind of feels like I don't know. I don't want to sit and. Why was I even about to say I don't want to punch down? Like, what am I? I'm an independent party. I'm not punching down on a federal political party, but it just like that's, but you get what I'm saying. I can't even, and you talked about the coalition and the folks that are eco-conscious and things like that, but also a party like the Green Party does attract some of the more wackadoodle fringe.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah,
there are like hard right wingers in the Green Party. And I think people that expects the whole like sort of like the drum circle on the beach, at McKenna on Maui, everybody's nude, banging on drums and smoking reefer. Like, that's not necessarily the Green Party. There's a lot of angst and anger and sort of weird kind of
conspiratorial type thinking. A lot of the anti-vax stuff. Whenever you look at polling, it's always like PPC, CPC, and then GPC. Like always within leading that pack. So I mean, they've got a lot of stuff to sort of sort out amongst their ranks. And again, like, do you do that with the leader that you've had for over a decade, or do you do that by trying to get new members into the party, by trying to seek out somebody new and fresh who's going to lead the party in a new direction, bring more people into the fold, put the environment on the like I said, on the forefront of the agenda, and really criticize rightfully where the current government has been lacking in terms of substantive and urgent climate action.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, I don't know if we knew ahead of right now whether or not Elizabeth May was even going to seek re-election in the Saanich Gulf Islands riding. So now we at least know that, right? I don't think you're running for the leadership if you're not seeking re-election. So at least we know that. Makes it interesting. She'll probably run away with it, as she has every other time she's sought office. So it remains to be seen. My friend, I will see you bright and early Wednesday morning. Alex was asking on the comments, is Seriously going to be on YouTube? And it sure is. But this episode's not this week. We got to tweak it. We got to figure it out. We learned a tough lesson. It's my fault about copyright violations. We ran a clip that we were not permitted to run, and believe it or not, it did not make it past YouTube's gatekeeper, and so we got our wrist slapped by YouTube. But that's okay. We want to play nice with YouTube, so we'll get that uploaded there. You can subscribe to Seriously, Supriya and Ryan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to everybody who checks it out either on Wednesday or wherever else it fits into your week. Supriya Dwivedi, always a pleasure, my friend.
Talk soon, Ryan.
Yeah, talk to you later. Enjoy your long weekend. We'll get into our Real Talk Roundtable, our Friday Roundtable in just a second. Tasha Kheiriddin, Azim Jiwani, and Rick Peterson. Who speaks for the middle anymore? What does the future of conservative politics in Canada look like? We welcome your comments live on YouTube. You can hit us up using our hashtag. That's RealTalkRJ. And of course, that's powered by our friends at Park Power that want to remind you, if you're not doing business with Park Power, you're probably paying too much. It's as simple as that. You can compare rates right now. Why not? This is a 2-minute exercise that could save you money every single month. Electricity, natural gas, and internet. They do all three, and you can bundle them together to save on administrative costs. We hear from people all the time, real talkers, literally every month, that reach out and say, I finally switched to Park Power. It took me 10 minutes, all in, and I have no idea why I didn't do it before. And we just go, yeah, well, welcome aboard. 2022-Real Talk is the promo code to get $70 knocked off your first bill. Our friends at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge are expecting a busy weekend as, of course, folks from across the province and even outside Alberta visit the dealerships to see their inventory in person. Why? Because it's the most extensive inventory in the province across 2 dealerships, whether you're looking for a Jeep, a beautiful vehicle out of that Dodge lineup, the Challenger, the Charger, you name it, and then, of course, the Ram 1500. Motor Trend's back-to-back truck of the year, including that TRX, an absolutely beautiful rig. You can shop online, too, if you'd rather do that, including their pre-owned selection at sherwooddodge.com and stalbertdodge.com. Athabasca University wants to remind you that this is a perfect time for you to check out opportunities, maybe your next step. Could be at Athabasca University. You're going, it's the end of July. We're heading into the August long weekend. Well, that's the point. Athabasca U is Canada's online university, which means you learn at your own pace. You learn at your own schedule. You're never going to miss an exam. You're never going to miss submitting an assignment because the kids were sick, or because you wanted to go to the water slides, or because your pal asked you last minute to go play a round of golf. The world-class accredited online programs and courses offer you the flexibility to learn at your own pace on a schedule that suits your lifestyle. And our friends at Friesen Brothers have asked us to share with you an announcement that they made yesterday in relation to that Valbella Gourmet Foods controversy. You remember this? That nasty email, that horrific email that was sent to organizers of Canmore Pride. We talked about it a bit on the show. Well, Friesen Brothers has been carrying Valbella sausages for a long time. They've got 16 locations across the province, announcing yesterday with immediate effect, Friesen Brothers has suspended their business relationship with Valbella Gourmet Foods until they're confident that the company's demonstrated Friesen Brothers' core values and fulfilled their commitment to change. You can find Friesen Brothers online at friesen.com. Well, coming up on August 11th, it's my pleasure to participate in a gathering, a conference organized by Center Ice Conservatives, a voice for mainstream Canadians. We're going to be talking about the future of conservative politics in the country. We're going to be examining the so-called middle ground. And we're going to be asking who speaks for the average Canadians these days. This thing is being organized by a group of people that are passionate about not just politics, but how they play out into everyday life. That includes Tasha Kheiriddin, past president of the Progressive Conservative Youth Foundation. You've, of course, heard her on national radio and have likely read her columns. She's a national columnist for Post Media. She's a principal with Navigator Limited. She's the author of The Right Path, How Conservatives Can Unite, Inspire, and Take Canada Forward. And she's the co-president of the Jean Charest campaign. We're also joined today by Azim Jiwani, who's co-founder and executive director of Center Ice Conservatives, also is the director of communication for the Ellis Ross BC Liberal Leadership Campaign, and my friend Rick Peterson, also the co-founder of Center Ice Conservatives. He's the founder and chair of Peterson Capital. Thanks to the three of you for making yourselves available for this Real Talk Roundtable. Tasha, congratulations on the new book. Following you on Twitter, it seems like you've been hitting bookstores across the country, signing copies and talking to people about the right path forward for Canada's Conservatives. You've obviously planted your flag with a candidate in the leadership race. Bring us up to speed on where you think the Conservative Party needs to go to make an impact in the next federal election.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. There's where to start. There's so much to do. This race, of course, will be decided by the membership, but the book was never about who should win the race. It was about where the party should take the country. And so the lessons I'm trying to impart are based on research and talking to hundreds of conservatives across the country, and they all point in the direction of the center right, where there's a big vacuum. The Liberals have kindly left us by having their little friends with benefits deal with the NDP. So there's a real appetite right now among what I would call both center-right conservatives, blue liberal switch voters, and common sense Canadians. We're looking for an alternative to the current government that is fiscally responsible, that wants to create a culture of opportunity, that also is, not subscribing to a lot of the identity politics and woke politics that we're seeing Mr. Trudeau and his colleagues subscribe to. And really, I talk about 3 voter bases: new Canadians, urban and suburban Canadians, and young people. And it's a path how the Conservatives can get those votes the next election and in the future.
We'll dig into some of those points that you just made, your so-called introductory comments, but let's meet our other 2 panelists this morning. Rick, I know that you have been passionate about this movement. You're no stranger to leadership campaigns. You've participated before as a candidate. How did Center Ice Conservatives come about?
Thanks, Ryan. It was Michael Stewart and I here in Edmonton, and a couple others just over time have said, you know what? There is a big opening in the center of the political spectrum that we think is underrepresented, whether it's conservatives or liberals or whatever party you're at. Large number of Canadians, Ryan, I think if you ask them, are you fiscally conservative and what used to be called progressive on the social side is mainstream now, right? LGBTQ, women's rights, First Nations reconciliation, the themes that Tasha's talked to. But the noise is all coming from the fringes, and we want to become what Dominique Carty, chair of our advisory council, is radical, noisy centrists, and I think we're doing a good job.
I want to dig into this, and Azim, we'll throw this one to you to take on first, but I'd love all 3 panelists because I had a question. I very rarely write questions down, my friends. I like to I told you in my email yesterday, I said, well, just open the gates and let's just start talking. But I did write down the question, is there such thing as a progressive conservative anymore? Azim, you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a lot of conservatives throughout Canada who are progressive on social issues, who have friends and family in the LGBTQ plus community, who, see basic social services, stuff like healthcare as foundational to our Canada society and the Canadian promise, and who want those systems and services to be robust and to work for a long time. And I think that's what a progressive conservative is. I think it's balancing out the values of free market and equal opportunity and, the ability to get ahead by working hard with the idea of having some sort of a community and one that accepts everybody in Canada. And I do think that is a relatively mainstream view. I mean, if you look at Tim Houston's government, he has the highest approval ratings right now of any premier in Canada. And it's because he's done such a great job of focusing on, yes, the economy, absolutely, but also on making sure those key services are robust and where they're not, trying to fix them so that we can have a stronger economy and a stronger Canada.
Tasha, you identified 3 groups that if you're you are a political strategist, but 4 political strategists you may want to look at, and you'd say we need to reach the young people. That's obvious, right? We need to win in the urban centers. That's obvious. New Canadians. I mean, that's typically been a targeted voter base by politicians through the years, and some to great success. So let me ask you this, with no offense to Rick, but the question is for you, Tasha, is it a mistake to call the movement Center Ice Conservatives? Are we trying to reach as many people as possible? Shouldn't it just be called the Center Ice?
Well, I think it's based in conservative principles, and those principles are appealing if they are presented in their true form. And I emphasize that to the groups that I've talked about. So I'm a very proud conservative because conservatism was begun as a response actually to unbridled populism. It was begun as a way to try and craft a balance between rights and responsibilities, the individual and the community. It's founded in pillars such as, well, the sort of trifecta people talk about: faith, family, and free enterprise. The faith being respect for faith. In fact, Edmund Burke respected all religions as far back as 1789. He's the founder of conservatism, and he talked about the merits of all faiths and the right to have your own belief, whatever it is. Family is something that you mentioned, New Canadians, that I talked about, extremely important to them as a value. Free enterprise is something that we need more of in this country. I think that conservatism actually is presented in the way it actually is, as opposed to sort of the impressions people have of it due to what's happened in the United States and other places. I think it'd be very appealing. So I think Center-Ice Conservatives really sums up what we're about.
Rick, have you picked a horse in the leadership race, or are you talking on the record about that? We know who Tasha's supporting, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But what about you?
Well, I got 2 names on my ballot, but we have on our team, Ryan, we have people that support all 5 candidates. But will you let me come back to Tasha, the question you asked-
you can talk about whatever you want. We want to just open up the floor. Let's treat it like we're having coffees.
You're onto something here, man. You're onto something. The reason we call it center-right conservatives is for all the reasons that you talked about. And you know what? We're conservative. One of the surprising things is, Azim and I are getting, Tasha as well, she's already getting tons of emails. I get emails and calls every day from liberals. And I get calls from liberals who feel a little bit alienated with the wokeism and the drift towards the NDP. And there's a debate inside our movement, Ryan, that, should we call ourselves center-right Canadians? We're not hiding the fact that we're conservatives. And Tasha's exactly right. The conservative principles that we all follow underline where we're going. But interesting, Ryan, is that something called center-right conservatives is drawing attention and support from people like Christy Clark, who are going to come and speak to us. Christy Clark, her party's name is Liberal, but she actually had a coalition of Liberal and conservatives. So we're on to something here, Ryan. We're on to something that we had no idea was as powerful and as strong as it is. And as usual, you picked it up ahead of everybody else.
Okay. Well, I wanted to let you know, by the way, as well, we were hoping to speak with former Premier Clark yesterday on the show. This was a real life issue we ran into, John, wasn't it? And that's just that she's going to have a great long weekend at her cabin, and we couldn't get the Wi-Fi strong enough. And so, I know. But like, if you can't understand that and roll with it in late July, you've got no business doing a talk show. And so this is a great opportunity to let everybody know that Christy Clark's going to join us on Tuesday on the show, and we're really looking forward to talking to her. Azim, Ellis Ross wanted to be BC's premier. I've spoken with him several times. He is a proud Indigenous man who has spoken strongly, for example, this is one example, I'm not characterizing his whole political career, but he has strongly supported Indigenous involvement in, investment in, ownership of pipelines. And I know that has earned him some support on some fronts and has, certainly earned him some consternation or some criticism from other Indigenous communities. Sharon, one of our beloved, loyal, regular listeners, is chimed in, and she says, as an Indigenous woman, she says, conservative policies has always made me uneasy. How does somebody like Ellis Ross, fitting into the conservative mold, operate in the sense of maybe changing perceptions that people might have about the party? How do you feel about Sharon's comment? Can you take it on? You were his director of communications.
I didn't think I still was, but all right.
No, I said you were.
Ellis? No, I know. I'm just cracking wise for you, right? Oh. All right. So, look, Ellis is a really, really unique politician. I think he's one of a kind. I don't think he fits the usual mold just because of his upbringing and his background coming from, real humble beginnings on his First Nation and coming to understand the importance of resource development, the importance of building up our economy, and the ability of people to find dignity from work. Frankly, that's something that's key to him, is the fact that when you create opportunities for people in Canada, whether it's BC or whether it's in any other province, you give them the opportunity to lift themselves up. And not everybody can do that. And we do need social services to help out those who can't. But I think somebody like Ellis, more than most, understands that principle of hard work and opportunity, and the fact that you give people the ability to provide for themselves, to provide for their families, that comes with a sort of a dignity and a sense of purpose. And I think that's a key conservative value. It always has been. But moreover, I don't think it's inherently right-wing. I don't think it's inherently left-wing. I think when we talk about center-ice conservatism, centrist conservatism, what we're talking about is that, the idea of hard work, of building community, of building economy, and of growing the country. And at our Let's Grow Canada conference, these are exactly the kind of ideas that we're going to be talking about on August 11th.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. People can check out centericeconservatives.ca. A friend of mine said, what sort of where do you think the conversations are going to go on that day? And I said, I have no idea, but I'm really looking forward to it. There are going to be people that have some very real questions about the entire premise. Tasha, I don't know about you, but I've typically said to people, I used to describe myself as a small p, small c progressive conservative until progressives told me to fuck off and conservatives told me to fuck off. And then I realized I had to come up with a new phrase. And so I guess I'm a centrist. I like to think of myself as a common sense, empathetic human being that tries to have a pretty good understanding of the role that government should play, that recognizes that there are are the marginalized and downtrodden. There are those that have been systemically oppressed that need to be supported. And there are also people that drive the nation's economy that also need to be supported by their government. And to try to find that happy balance, I don't think that it's impossible. But you, all three of you, I guarantee have heard the same thing I've heard. And that is that it is impossible to be fiscally conservative and socially progressive. People say because a fiscal conservative must inherently try to clamp down on government spending on social programs. They say that it's an impossible marriage. I'd love for all three of you to take this on. Tasha, why don't you go first?
I don't think it's impossible at all. In fact, I think that the conservative ethos is very much that you should be able to live your life and be who you are, as long as you're not infringing on the liberties of someone else. And this is why, law and order is also a big part of conservatism, which we haven't really talked about much, but it is a sense that you need a functioning justice system and respect by everyone for rules and norms of certain kinds so that you can actually coexist peacefully, to your point, and respect those freedoms and those rights that people have. So it's this balancing act. And I think that, socially, I talk about this in The Right Path. We have issues in this country that social conservatives, yes, some are concerned about. Abortion, I'll put it out there, is a big one. But, Stephen Harper had it right when he said, okay, we're closing the door on that one. We're not revisiting it. We can do other things on the social conservative spectrum to discuss issues in education, for example, sort of the interest-based politics and wokeism in education. A big concern I've heard from a lot of young conservatives, especially at the university level, but also lower down. That's an issue that's of concern to, I say, all Canadians, a lot of common sense Canadians, social conservatives. There's issues like that we can make common ground on. But the fiscally responsible piece is something that really, I think, is the glue. It's the sense, not just about money, but the government doesn't tell you, doesn't run everything and trying to refashion society in its own image. We leave a lot of government and space to local decision making in a conservative universe. That's something we don't talk about enough either. People need to have control at the ground level as opposed to being controlled from 30,000 feet. And conservatives would do that. That is one of the principles of the worldview, if you will, and would be of a conservative government.
Rick, how do you're a business guy. You're the chair of Peterson Capital. We talked about that. You're a money guy. How do you reconcile that, or how do you respond to people that say you can't be exactly what you say you are, which is fiscally conservative and socially progressive?
Great intro, Ryan, because the only way to be socially progressive is to be smart with your money, fiscally conservative, right? Private sector, and Ryan, there's no better example than here in Alberta. Alberta is leading Canada and the world in the energy transition, ESG. So if you look at the private sector, every single company in Canada, and Edmonton is the undiscovered secret, Jespo, of early stage hydrogen, lithium, helium entrepreneurs, and the public companies who are out there creating jobs, creating wealth, paying taxes. You know what the number one issue that they have is? What do you think is at the top of their line before it's the bottom line? What's the one issue that is a red button issue? Come on, Jespo, I want you to guess this one. What do you think is top priority for the CEO of these upstart, young, growing, wealth-generating, job-creating companies? What is it?
Well, I don't know, Rick, or I'd be the CEO of a billion-dollar company. How do I don't know. I want to say profits, but that sounds like that's not what you're getting at. That's an ugly answer. I don't know.
That's right. You know what it is, Ryan? It's ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards, right? If you don't meet proper environmental, social, and governance standards, if you're falling behind in your Indigenous representation, if you're falling behind in gender equality, if you're falling behind in LGBTQ representation, if you're falling behind in environmental standards, you will not get capital, you'll not get growth, you will not get support. So in our Canadian economy, it's the private sector that's way ahead of the government. The private sector that's way ahead of where the Trudeau Liberals are trying to tell people, this is where you go, this is what you do, right? So to back up Tasha's points and to back up Azim's points, is there are more fiscal conservatives who are socially progressive in the private sector. They just don't feel attached to any one of these liberals of the two major parties, or tags of the two major parties right now. So you got to be fiscally conservative to be socially progressive.
So Azim, you're executive director of Center Ice Conservative, so you're going to get this question from a lot of people, and from some folks, it's going to be their very first question to you, and that is, are you trying to start a new political party? What's the deal here? Is there room on the political spectrum? Is there room on the landscape for a new party?
So we're not trying to start a new political party. That is absolutely not the goal of center-right conservatives. As to whether there's room on the political spectrum, ultimately over the long term, that's going to be up to Canadians. But what we're doing right now is trying to build a coalition of like-minded people who have common sense, who believe that we've got to balance budgets, we've got to look after the economy, and we've got to make sure that there's great jobs for Canadians. And at the same time, who understand that, look, a woman's right to choose, LGBTQ plus issues, those are issues that have been resolved a really long time ago in the minds of most Canadians. And we've got to move past those kind of divisive issues, the cultural cleavages that come from cheap populism, and focus on the issues that matter. Because ultimately in this country, we're doing great. It's a G7 country, one of the best in the world. I think the best country in the world. But we have serious issues that need to be dealt with. I mean, our healthcare system over the long run, there's got to be some sort of a comeuppance here, because it's not sustainable. We've seen through the COVID-19 crisis that the lack of long-term care beds, that the lack of ER beds, that's all weighing on the system heavily. We've got nurses who are extremely burnt out. It's an epidemic across the country. We can't find enough healthcare workers. And that's just one component of one system. There are big issues in this country in terms of government and in terms of governance that need common sense, sensible solutions, that need pragmatic ideas injected into these systems so we can take control for the long term and make sure that this country is prosperous and sustainable for a very long time.
I just dropped into our live chat on YouTube, and there's more than one audience member that's curious to know how the three of you, or at least those that are using or invoking the phrase, might describe wokeism, or what qualifies someone's perspective as woke. Some people are taking it as a slur, and I think that it is used in a dismissive fashion, like many other words. How would you describe wokeism, or when does someone or something qualify as woke?
I'll jump in, because why not? I think it's something I've written about a lot. Wokeism reminds me a lot of the political correctness movement of the 1980s, and the definitions vary. It has become a slur. Originally, it was someone who was aware of these issues and sort of twigged to the fact that, some of the concerns that Rick was talking about have not been adequately addressed in society, and is open-minded and says, hey, I believe that we should have rights, equal rights for all, this kind of thing. But it's actually gone further than that, because it is now it's seen as a way of shutting down conversation. There's the whole pronoun debate about if you misgender someone or mispronoun someone, that you're suddenly taken to the woodshed and beaten senseless. People make mistakes, and there's no room in wokeism for mistakes. That's the problem. It's very black and white. It's very either or. You're either a friend of the LGBTQ community, or you're an enemy. And it is something that is so. By using identity politics, it's trying to define people in such a harsh way that many people feel they can't even speak or say anything, because they will be accused of being racist or anti-gay. And it's very hard to have any conversation if that happens. And the university students, like I said, I spoke to for the book, many of them came to conservatism because of this. They said, I couldn't say anything in class. People were afraid of having conversations about subjects that, were important to them, because anything you said could be taken the wrong way. And it's that feeling of discomfort, I think a lot of people feel, that makes them uncomfortable, and says, this has to stop. We have to be able to have conversation and actual dialogue, or else these issues will actually never, fully actually be resolved to people's satisfaction.
Azim, Rick, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I do want to follow up on this. Just to follow exactly where Tasha has come from, is we are a safe place for those discussions, right? We're providing a place where you can have discussions where, if you look, I don't know if you can see, Ryan, I've got my pronouns on my Zoom screen. And the reason I do that is to show people who are talking to me and inside Peterson Capital is that we are open and recognize all different genders. And we do this in a way that's welcoming and open, but we don't beat people over the head with it, right? And I think that's an important part. And I'm going to skate back, just to use a hockey phrase. You know what? There is room for another political party right now in Canada. There is an amazing opening. I mean, I'm in the business of looking at markets and things that are opportunity. There is an enormous opportunity in the center of the kit now. Who's going to take it? Who's going to take it? Is it going to be the Conservative Party? Is it going to be the Liberal Party? Is it going to be somebody else? Jespo, I sent you last night at 11 o'clock when I couldn't sleep because of the heat. I saw on CNN, did you see that? A new movement in the U.S. has just started. It's called Forward. And for the same dialogue that we have here, Republicans and Democrats are seen to be too extreme. In France, you got a president who just won a second term from the center. So yeah, Ryan, you know what? We have no interest here. Trying to start a party is just like it's a gong show.
Hang on.
No.
So Azim says we are not starting a new, but you say not, and then you say no. There's tons of room for a new party, but we're not going to do. Come on.
Both could be true, Ryan. Both.
Okay, well,
could be true.
I hope what Rick is saying, and I think I understand what Rick is saying, is that there's a space for a party to occupy that spot. Who's going to take it? The Liberals have shifted off to the left. Over here, we can't even see them anymore. That's the left. But the Conservatives can occupy that space. It doesn't mean creating a new party. I in my book, I'm very clear about that too. I'm like, that is not a good idea from a logistical standpoint. It's always worked against the Conservatives historically. But there's a space for an existing party to occupy, and we should be there. So I think, Rick, putting words in your mouth, but I hope that's what you meant.
Just to follow up again, Jessica, listen to this. We've been around 90 days. We're fully financed. We've got a conference going. We got 50 emails coming every day. Like, whoa, we weren't expecting this. Where's this coming from? Where's what's the vein that we've tapped into? Jessica, if that doesn't tell me, and all of us on this screen have been around politics a long time, I have never seen this.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you that one of the reasons why I'm participating, Rick, is because I share the concern, and I don't know what I would call it, but I see it all the time. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the whole bedrock upon which Real Talk is built. I fear that human beings, generally speaking, are losing the ability, or at least the loudest ones, are losing the ability to have conversations with people with whom they disagree. And it's just like the assumptions that people make about each other, the takeaways that people pull from brief interactions, oftentimes that happen out of context in 280 characters on Twitter. I've almost lost my appetite for it. But I have to be one of those, and I suspect the three of you are there as well as your lineup of panelists, and as well as some people that will not attend this conference, that it is a priority. It's incredibly important for us to be able to talk about this stuff and maybe seek to understand that premise that has defined the steps of highly effective people in past. And so that's why I'm eager to participate myself. Obviously, when you talk about where political parties move or what policy looks like, a huge part of that, Tasha, is the invigoration and the fundraising and the membership sales that come along with a leadership race. Now, you're co-president of the Charest campaign. How would you assess the importance and the implications of the outcome of this race?
Well, it's going to be defining, that's clear. And it's defining because we have competing visions for the party. And it's not even so much between social conservatism, though that is represented by Leslie Lewis, for example, and traditional fiscal conservatism. It is really more populism versus what I would call common sense conservatism, or the conservatism that can reach the common sense Canadian, the kind of stuff Center Ice is talking about. Populism is something that we've seen around the world. It's now, as a trend, really come to Canada. It's grown mostly out of opposition to vaccine mandates and the restrictions people felt deprived them of the so-called control over their lives. The problem I have with it is that it is very divisive, and it pits the so-called elites against the common person. Historically, this has played out in some very bad ways, and it's also in Canadian politics. It's we've seen divisions, other parties being formed, such as the Reform Party, for example, that kept the Liberals in power for 13 years. So to me, populism is not the direction. It takes you further to the right as opposed to the center right. But the traditional conservative stuff we talked about earlier and throughout this broadcast is what would inform a conservative, centrist, center-right conservative party. So that's where that's the vision I believe should be taken forward. Clearly, there's a division in the membership on that issue, but how it plays out in the votes, we will know on September 10th. And the race it's far from over, as we are seeing in the polls, and as we're seeing also in terms of conversation, even on Twitter today, some trends in Mr. Charest's favor. So
we had, by the way, that ad that the Charest campaign just released is pretty bang on, pretty unbelievable. Actually, I thought it was really well done. You have to wonder. I say this respectfully. If it's too little, too late, I don't know. Remains to be seen. I know that you're shaking your head for people listening on the podcast.
Only 80,000 people had sent in their votes out of 675,000. So there's a lot of people who have to fill out those ballots.
Yeah, to be sure. So I spoke with my colleague, Supriya Dwivedi. You three probably know we've kicked off a podcast. We're 2 weeks in. Seriously, Supriya and Ryan, you can get it every Wednesday. And just a couple of days ago, our episode 2 discusses whether or not the Conservatives are actually divided. Like everybody says, Supriya makes the argument that they're not. She says the Conservative Party is not divided. You have to listen to the podcast if you want to hear her argument. But she did ask me to put a question in front of the three of you. I spoke with her right before we got together, and she says this assertion that there are loud voices on the far left and the far right, and there's this vacuum in the middle where maybe the majority of Canadians occupy that middle ground. She wanted me to ask the three of you, who would you say is representing the loud voices on the far left? She wasn't convinced that actually is a thing. Azim, what would you say? I mean, do you see it?
I mean, Minister Guilbeault from Justin Trudeau's government might be one person I would call out. I mean, some of the rhetoric around anti-resource development that's historically come out of the Trudeau government, I think is pretty far left. This is a country where the economy is principally resource driven. It's a country where, as Rick said, the resource sector is doing more for sustainability and sustainable energy development than any other country in the world, maybe. So, I mean, the idea that we're going to, rapidly decrease our resource output, that we're going to fight mining projects, that we're going to fight, natural gas projects that we know are green or clean, especially compared to other projects around the world. I think that's pretty radical, right? I mean, when you're telling people that you're going to take away jobs and opportunities and their ability to potentially build a better future, because those jobs and those opportunities should maybe be better placed elsewhere. I think that's radical. I don't think that that's a centrist, common sense position. I don't think that it's right wing to think that developing resources in a country with a principally resource economy is the smart, sensible thing to do.
Ryan, I'm going to chime in here. There's nothing wrong with voices on the far left or the far right being loud. Go to it. They have the right to do so. The problem in the middle here is we're just too quiet. We're just too, these are issues that we agree with. We're sure everybody agrees with us. But you know what? I'm going to go for a bike ride, or I'm going to go golfing, or I'm going to go camping. Hey, we're getting beat by people who are really good at getting the message out, right? Think of one group, Ryan. Can you think of one group that kind of speaks for the middle? Is there anybody out there who you think, the answer is no. That's why we got a fire hose of interest coming into center-right conservatives.
Yeah. Well, there's one group now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I guess it's like, how do you define the middle, and how do you whatever? I mean, I try to come back to phrases that some people probably think are pithy and diluted, and just things like, I mean, what does mainstream mean? What does average mean? And I do also, like, just to spell it out, want to be so aware. We talk about acknowledging privilege. I grew up, my dad was a physician. Our house was on a lake. I attended a private school. I'm white. I'm male. I'm straight. A middle income earner. There's a lot of things where my perspective is like what the average Canadian is looking for. If you're an Indigenous child that was, taken as part of the 60s scoop, and your parents were taken and their parents were taken, or if you're a new Canadian, or if you're living in poverty, or if you don't have access to services and opportunities, so I hesitate, and I try to be aware of that in talking about what the average Canadian wants, because my perspective is mine and only mine. And we try to use this show to glean other perspectives from across the country and even beyond. But I do think that when you talk about so-called common sense, what I'm curious to know is, we'll see something, for example, fly up or flare up on social media, right? Something becomes like the big story of the week on social media. And then I'll walk my dogs down the sidewalk and interact with 100 people on Edmonton's beautiful Victoria Promenade overlooking the golf course, or down the sidewalks of the streets. And I'll realize that none of these people are furious and throwing things at each other and calling each other names. These are just people that are trying to make their way through their lives and have their kids, if they have kids. I want to even be careful and obvious, aware of that. But they want to leave the planet. They want to leave the reality better than when they entered planet Earth, And I think that there is that, I hope, or assume, is a shared value of most people, that we want to leave the place better than when we showed up. And so I try to have that drive my philosophies, or at least even my explorations through conversations like these.
Ryan, none of us have any control where we come from, where our parents were, where we're born into. But what we do have control over is what we do and what we say. And the interesting thing about centralized conservatives is Tasha and Azim and the 8 or 10 of us that started this said, hey, let's just put it out there. And you know what? We don't have concrete definitions of everything. There's just this feeling, Ryan, that we're on the right path, that we're going somewhere where there's a lot of interest and commonality, right? Now, we have on our advisory council, by the way, Peter Kent just joined us this morning. Very highly respected name. But we have in the advisory council, Brian Brulotte, who's a strong Pierre Poilievre supporter. Brian Brulotte is a very well-known person in Ottawa. He threw his hat in the leadership ring for the Conservatives a couple of years ago on the first round. And why would Brian Brulotte be attracted to centre-right Conservatives, or Cameron Bonesso? Both are from Ottawa. The idea is, no matter what Pierre Poilievre is talking about, or any one of the 5 candidates that are still in the race, elements of what they are talking about are of interest to mainstream Canadians. Other elements, perhaps a little less. So if Brian Brulotte is with us, Ryan, it's because he wants to make sure that those elements that we have a commonality in are expressed in, if Mr. Poilievre becomes the leader, in his leadership. And for me, I would be disappointed if we didn't have voices that were different inside our team. So this is kind of an interesting platform that we have, because we're just kind of building it. But everybody's coming together and everybody's saying to us, hey, I feel like I'm part of that. So you don't need to define it, and you don't have to be embarrassed by who you are from where you come and where you live. But it's important that you articulate and you raise your voice and you make your concerns known, because if not, the fringes are going to make all the noise and the fringes are going to dominate. Interesting, Tasha, I didn't know. Only 80,000 votes are coming back. If it's 100,000 people are going to be determining the next official leader of the opposition. Wow. We have to make sure that among those 100,000 votes that come back, there are people who speak for the mainstream Canadians.
Well, and Rick, how many votes do you think it's going to be people determining the next premier of Alberta? Way fewer than that. But Tasha, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, I was going to say we have to get out the vote. All the campaigns have to get out their vote. It's really important that it's not just 80,000 people who've already voted that decide, and it won't be. And this is the important thing to go forward. And to the point of your sidewalk conversations, it's really interesting because, yes, people make a lot of noise in social media. The average person is not on Twitter. In fact, it's a preserve mostly for the chattering class, I will say, of journalists and activists and politicos. But, just to give an example from my hometown, my adopted hometown of Toronto, the TDSB, the Toronto School Commission, decided they were going to change the way that specialty schools in the city accept students. They were previously accepted on merit, and you had to compete to get into an art school or a science school. And now they changed it. It's going to be a lottery. Why? Just a lottery. The reason they're doing this is they say, well, you've got some of the folks you're talking about who didn't have every chance in life, from minority backgrounds, new Canadians, et cetera, that aren't represented adequately. So what they're going to do is they're going to change the whole system, but in a way that basically, it doesn't recognize the fact that, in fact, from those communities, ironically, more kids will go to university, more kids will try harder in school than kids of parents who were born here. And it doesn't also improve the access to education across the board so that those kids can better compete to get into those specialized schools. And when my daughter, found out that the art school that is near where we live, that she has dreamed of going to since she's in grade 1, is now a question of a lottery, she cried. She said, I've been working so hard, Mommy. I've been doing my art online, and I've been trying, it's a sense of unfairness. This is woke politics. This is what minority, groups of people who decide that this is a better way to achieve an outcome versus having a full conversation about how do we achieve that outcome. A conservative would say, let's raise the bar for everybody, not simply say, well, we're just going to make it a system that doesn't recognize any excellence, because excellence itself can't be good. This is what people are frustrated about the left. They're equally frustrated also on the right. So we're saying, no, the average person looks at this and goes, it's not fair. It's this sense of fairness. And that is restoring fairness and equality of opportunity to the conversation, I think, is a big part of what center-right conservatives and center voters are about. They're looking for things that make sense to them and are not dictated by ideology or just whims.
So again, this conference, Center Ice Conservatives, a voice for mainstream Canadians, goes August 11th. People can check it out online at centericeconservatives.ca on the roundtables. As I'm thanking the three of you for your time, for your availability, and wishing you a good August long weekend, I always like to ask if there's anything that we've left unaddressed. Is there one thing that when we end this call, you're going to go, I wish we would have talked about that? I guess I'm asking for a closing statement of sorts. Azim, you want to take this one first?
Sure. So, folks, if you're watching this and you're interested in attending Edmonton August 11th, we've only got 20 tickets left. So I think that's something important to mention. If you want to come, it's almost sold out. So if you're watching today, please come on, sign up. We're really looking forward to seeing you there. And by the way, it's going to be a nuanced conversation. It's going to be a nuanced debate. I think nuance is one of the things that we've really been missing in our political discourse in Canada. And it's one of the things that Center Ice is bringing back to the table. So please, folks, we hope we're going to see you there on August 11th.
All right. I guarantee when the podcast drops, you're going to sell those 20 tickets. Rick, you want to go next?
Well, there's actually 14. I just got the report online here.
Well, there you go.
So there's only 14 tickets, just both $75 a piece.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, this is going to be the highlight in Canada for a policy conference. Just we got you talking about diversity, equality, and inclusion, not only in federal, but provincial politics. Chief Billy Moran is going to be there. We've got David Staples going to be here locally. Azim's flying in from Vancouver. Christy Clark, Andrew Coyne is going to be coming out. Jack Mintz. Hey, where do you get a lineup like that? Every single person has come. They paid their own way. They're paying their own hotel to sit in a hotel room in Edmonton in the middle of summer for 7 hours talking policy. That tells you
Edmonton in the middle of summer is the best place in the country. Tasha, last word to you.
Well, I would just say I'm incredibly thrilled to be part of this group and going to the conference as well and sitting in that hotel room, because I think that Canada's future is worth giving up a Sunday in August, and really debating the issues that are on the radar of so many people, but that are not represented. So we have to give representation to those center ice conservatives, those center right voters who are looking for a real alternative to government. Otherwise, we won't have a democracy. This is the reality. It's not just about the Conservative Party. It's about a functional democracy with a choice for voters, a real choice that could form government. And I really believe that the party has to go down this road if it's going to be that potential alternative to the Liberals in the next election.
All right. I'm looking forward to moderating some of those conversations. It's been a great opportunity to chat with the three of you today, to push people outside their comfort zones, to get people thinking, to get people more engaged in what's happening around them. I think that's a fabulous thing. That's Tasha Kheiriddin. Make sure you check out Tasha's new book. You'll find it online, therightpathbook.com. And again, Azim Jiwani, Rick Peterson with Center Ice Conservatives. You can find them online as well, centericeconservatives.ca. 14, did you say 14 tickets left, Rick? Appreciate it.
Tickets.
Yeah, to the three of you. Have a great long weekend. We'll see you on August 11th.
Thanks, Jespo.
Yeah, you bet.
Bye.
Thanks to the audience that's been either watching this or listening to it live. Those of you that'll catch it later, we welcome your comments. I love this from Jillian, although I think I've lost her comment now, but she said something like, Jillian's going to start a new movement, Conservatives for Wokeism, and she's going to see who shows up on that one. So I think that would be great. Yeah, the word woke, it's like a real, it really, like, if
I hate it.
If it's kind of like, it's a pretty heavy, it gets a lot of people, it gets some people going, yeah, woke, and then it gets other people defensive, and it gets people ticked off, and I think that word has gained a lot of impact. The word has gained a lot of punch power that it didn't have even just a few years ago.
It's a tool. When I hear someone say woke, I'm like, oh, this person doesn't want to talk anymore. You know what I mean? This person
maybe that's kind of the point.
This person doesn't like what they're hearing. This doesn't. It's an excuse to say, my opinion isn't valid. But it's really, I mean, it started out like a good word, Ryan. It was about people who give a shit.
You want to be woke,
right? Yeah.
You want to be relevant or up to speed or understand it. Yeah. But this, I think, speaks to the bigger conversation as well about what's happened to the state of discourse and the fact that do you see a lot of people? I see it happening like in individual circles, people with their friends.
I think what you said, like a lot of this stuff is happening online, and then you go talk to regular, everyday people you see on the street, and a lot of it's 10 times. It's 10 times amplified online, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, online is a whole different thing.
It's not real life.
It's not real life. It doesn't mean that some perspectives aren't valid.
Oh, no.
But it's not real life.
It's a great place to keep up with what's going on in the world. It's not always the most valid, resource for news, but things just get amplified so much online, and then you can't see the person, right? When you look someone in the eye, it's a lot It's a lot different.
It is. And I think it's important to just remember the humanity of all of this. Like it seems a little kumbaya to say things like, we're all in this together, but it's true.
Yeah. What's wrong with being woke? What's wrong with understanding issues, being empathetic,
let's say
putting
enlightened.
on someone else's shoes.
Let's just take that word out of the vernacular completely and say enlightened. Who wouldn't want to be enlightened? People always used to say to me, so you call yourself a progressive, and I don't use that word anymore. I don't. I use the word not to describe myself, but I used to, when I would say a progressive conservative, it seemed to me to be a good fit for where I thought that my values or my political priorities laid. Small p, small c. And then I would always say to people, they say, "Oh, well, why do you consider yourself a progressive?" I'd say, "What do you want to be, a regressive?" Like,
well,
if there's
obvious, right?
one of two choices, which one do you want to be?
It's obvious. I don't think you need to say it anymore. If you're not progressing, like what are you doing? You're just standing in one place,
Yeah. We welcome your comments. I love that John's chiming in. We want you to do the same thing. Maybe you'll hear this weekend. Maybe you'll hear this a week from now or a month from now. Talk at Ryan Jesperson is where you can get in touch with the show. Our friends at Eden Landscaping want to remind you, whatever your vision for your outdoor space, they will execute it with precise attention to detail. We're talking full service landscaping from excavation all the way through to the finished product. The majority of your landscaping handled by their team, and then whatever they're not handling, they have strong relationships with the skilled trades for any additional construction needs. What does that mean? It means that you don't become a subcontractor. It means that you don't have to general contract your build. Mike and his team at Eden Landscaping have it covered for you, and they don't leave the project until you are completely satisfied. You can check out their portfolio, the work they've done, their satisfied customers sharing their photos online at landscapeedmonton.ca. And I wanted to share this personal photo with you. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll describe for you. This is my sweet nephew, Jove. Jove is visiting us from Vancouver this weekend, and yesterday he was absolutely delighted when Uncle Ryan got the green light to give him his very first Buster Bar. Now, it was the layers of fudge, the peanuts, the chocolate dip that he couldn't believe. It was his mom, Lindsay's, marveling at the soft-serve Dairy Queen ice cream that had everybody recognizing the beauty that is the Buster Bar. You can find these at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. That's Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. The John Hicks recommendation at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Johnny?
Add a little sauce to a poolside punch. That's what I'd tell you to do.
The Twisty Misty Slush. Every Friday, our friends at Local Environmental give us a chance to blow off a little steam, to say what we think, in some circumstances, to say what's not being said, what maybe needs to be said. It's a tradition we call Trash Talk! All right, so this week I had some folks ask for, demand insight into why I might block somebody or several people on Twitter. It feels like a good time to remind everybody how this all works. Nobody is obligated to give you access to their social media. You are not entitled to the privilege of reading somebody's posts, enjoying their personal photos, or learning more about what makes them tick. Without debate, every individual has the right to choose the extent to which they participate in social media, including what they post, who they follow, or who follows them. Nobody owes you an explanation as to why they've withdrawn their consent for you to access their account. There are many reasons why somebody may ignore, mute, or block people, lock down their own account, or even burn it all down. Perhaps they're tired of being agitated, antagonized, harassed, bullied, misrepresented, plagued, provoked, badgered, hounded, pestered, or heckled. Perhaps they're done with you hijacking their posts. Perhaps they're saying no to bad faith arguments or locust-style attacks. Maybe they just feel like it. Maybe they're having a tough day. Maybe they're having a great day. Maybe it's for their mental health. Maybe it's just for kicks. All that matters is nobody owes you jack squat. When you're a public-facing person who hears from hundreds of people every day, hitting the block button is the cheapest form of therapy. Heck, I'd probably block more people if I didn't already have them muted and off my radar. Don't be offended, and please don't be angry. It's not you, it's me. Actually, no, it is you. Still, though, there's more to life than Twitter, and there's certainly more to productive discourse than whatever you call what happens on that hell site. So, To all the folks I've blocked before, go for a walk, get yourself some fresh air, and maybe we'll have a chance to chat in person sometime where I guarantee you won't say the things to my face that you throw in my face online. That is real talk for real life, which is all that really matters. Have a great long weekend, everybody, and we'll see you back here live on Tuesday morning.